What's up, y'all? Welcome on into the GoVols247 Podcast. Wes Rucker coming to you from Fort Rucker Studio here on a lovely Thursday morning in God's own Knoxville, Tennessee. How are you? I hope you're well. Hope your week has been good. I hope it's back to business this week, right? Last week there was an open date. This week, back in gear, Tennessee, going back on the road to Arkansas, to Fayetteville specifically, to play the Arkansas Razorbacks on Saturday night, ABC, 7:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff for a team that will never again play under the light of the sun, I don't believe. I think that's how things are going to go this season, but that's all right. How are you? Hope you're well. Hope everything has been good with you. Joined by Ben McKee and Patrick Brown on this edition of the podcast. Fellas, how are we doing this morning?
Doing well. Excited for some Tennessee football this weekend.
I'm doing good as well, fellas.
Yeah, I'm glad because I was a little concerned about you, Pat, because now you've joined me in the baseball teams that don't have a postseason anymore, or at all in this case. So Ben is the only one now who actually gets a little, still has some postseason baseball in his life. So he's over there smiling like a doofus, and we're sitting here with no playoff baseball to watch. That's okay. It's okay. You can't win the ball.
Yeah, well, neither can the Steelers. They lost last week, so it's not all super hunky-dory for Ben over there.
That's true.
Says the guy that's rooting for Denny Hamlin, who can't get out of his own way.
Yeah, that's you know what? Sports. If you win all the time, you don't appreciate when you actually win anymore. So that's what I've come to tell myself over the years is that if you win
which of your teams wins all the time? You like the Cubs and Arsenal?
No, that's what I'm saying. But that's why I appreciate wins, because the only teams that I ever support are teams that's never
Patrick,
given, right?
Patrick,
what?
You can speak to me when you cover a national championship winning team.
You didn't throw a pitch last season.
How do you know?
He ran the base.
I got into the batting cage prior to a media availability and took some swings.
How'd that go for you?
It went well. I hit some nice ones. Me and Mike Wilson were throwing BP to each other, waiting on Tony to come talk to us. It was with Dalton Bargo's bat, and then Bargo goes out and hit a couple of home runs. So was Mike and I responsible for it? Yes, we were.
That's some of that McKee magic right there. That's what that was.
That's right. What they call it. That's what they call it. And Tennessee would like to have a little Razorback Stadium magic on Saturday night against Arkansas, a game that I think, if we're being honest, if we're all sitting here being honest, and we try to be, right? We try to be honest people, honest men of honor. Lies do not become us. I think this is a game that if Tennessee shows up, plays pretty well, Tennessee wins the game. However, that's never a given. That's never a given. And the way a team performs coming off of an open date is interesting. I think Heupel's teams, for the most part, unless I'm misremembering something, I think they've been pretty good coming off open dates throughout his career as a head coach. They've tended to come out pretty sharp. Now, if this was like coming off an open date and it was a nooner, bam, I'd have very little doubts. But it is on the road at night. And so that brings another element to it. And we've had some Arkansas coverage throughout the week on the site. We're going to have more. Is there anything in the past couple of days? I suppose we could start with the injury report, because that's a thing that's new in our lives now, right?
Let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that. It was good if you're a Tennessee fan, not so good if you're an Arkansas fan. Good if you're a Tennessee fan that Lance Herbert's not on there. But what did we think about it overall? I guess we'll start with Pat and go to Ben.
Yeah, obviously there were a lot of eyes on it to see what Lance Herbert's status was going to be after the whatever you want to call it, from Oklahoma week and him not playing and him missing a second game, but he's not on it. Now, there are still 2 availability reports to come out Thursday night and Friday night before we get to game day. So there is always the possibility that someone could pop on it, but we'll have to see. They didn't add anybody Oklahoma week. The only real change through the 3 days of the release of those reports was Hurd going from questionable to out on Friday night, which again was an indication that he did not travel, given that the Friday night report came out after the team left. And I think, as we discussed at the time, there are some parameters on reporting on the team side of these things. So if you were to say a guy that doesn't get on the plane to go to a road game is questionable, that could be misconstrued as manipulation, I guess. And there are fines for such things with these injury reports. So the fact that Hurd's not on it, the fact that John Campbell's not on it, the fact that Boo Carter was not on it, a couple of those guys, Campbell and Boo, I guess, left the Oklahoma game early with little things. So that's all very good and positive for Tennessee. I think it's a little bit of a surprise for me, at least, that Sham Umarov was not on it. We'll see what his status is this weekend after his injury against Kent State, it looked like he was going to be. And that was some of the indication I got, was that he might be out for a little while. So that's a nice development. Maybe a little bit of offensive line depth on the interior back as well. Plus, you apparently are going to have your top tackles, which is a positive development for Tennessee, as we've talked about a lot over the last couple of weeks on this podcast. The need to have those guys ready to go. So there were only 4 guys on it. They were all listed out. John Slaughter's going to miss another game. Jordan Thomas is obviously out for the season. Montreal Bandy's a walk-on cornerback that people are going, who the hell is that guy? But he's played a ton on special teams. I think he's played most snaps on those units behind Idris Farouk. And the other absence is going to be Edwin Spillman, the freshman linebacker, who missed the first 2 games and came back. But he's dealing with something, so he's not going to play in this game. So, but really, the bigger story to me, Ben, was who was not on it, and I think that's a huge positive for Tennessee, especially when you compare it to Arkansas, which had, I think they had 10 guys on it, and I think like 3 tight ends, 3 receivers, or 3 defensive backs, a couple of receivers. So this is a team that's playing, I believe, its 6th straight game, which in a season of 2 open dates is pretty crazy. But I think Tennessee is feeling the effect of having an extra week to get some guys rested and healthy and ready to go for this October swing, Ben.
And what is this, the 6th straight game for Arkansas, or 5th?
Yeah.
So it's a pretty beat up football team. And listening to Sam Pittman speak to his media earlier this week, he voiced his concern about the tight end position and its health. He flat out said that he is worried about the health of his tight end room, and that was reflected on the availability report that came out on Wednesday night. So that was my biggest takeaway after the Lance Hurd storyline. Obviously, it's a great thing to see him not on there as of now. Of course, he could be added later in the week, but the expectation is that he is going to play. But that was also the expectation going into the Oklahoma game as well. So I was surprised that he was not on there at all. I thought he would be on there and probably be listed as probable. But an even better sign that he was not on there at all. John Campbell Jr. the same way, but that's just going to be a deal that he has to manage all season long, and more of a pain tolerance type of thing as well with his knee. But certainly a good thing. And aside from the Lance Hurd and offensive tackle discussion, Patrick, my biggest takeaway was just how fresh of a football team Tennessee is right now. Of course, it's not perfect. You'd like to have Jordan Thomas out there, and you have some guys that are nicked up. Even with Lance Hurd not being on there, I mean, he's still nicked up, right? He's not 100%. No football player is if they're playing going into October. So with that being understood, Wes, I think this is a really healthy Tennessee football team, a really fresh Tennessee football team. And to your point before we started talking about the availability report, it's a situation where Tennessee, I mean, they are the better football team. They're the healthier team. They're the fresher team. They should go into Fayetteville on Saturday night and handle business.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, I think you saw during that Oklahoma game just how physical this Tennessee team is. And if you're an Arkansas team that's already kind of teetering a little bit physically, and you're playing a Tennessee team that's kind of fresh, you would assume that the home field advantage for a night game under the lights in the SEC would offset that to some extent. But getting hit hard hurts just as much at home as it does on the road. Like that's something that doesn't matter where it happens. It still hurts, right? You get hurt at sea level, it hurts. You get hurt in Denver, it hurts. You get hurt at home, hurts. Hurt on the road, hurts. And so I think that's one thing that I'm also looking forward to in this game is that Arkansas is a team. It's not a small football team, especially in the backfield offensively. Those are some big guys. All right. Those are some big dudes They'll run through you. They'll run through contact. They got some big guys on defense that'll hit you. Their wide receivers, they got some big guys there. But Tennessee is a team that is physical. And I have to think over the course of 60 minutes, that's something that should matter in that game. If Arkansas is playing a 6th consecutive game, is already a little dinged up, Tennessee is about as fresh as you could want to be heading into October, I think. You from both the standpoint of, I guess, what in the NBA they'd call load management on some of the guys who haven't had to play a lot of 4-quarter games yet, and they're coming off of an open date. And Arkansas has played, for the most part, 6 games, a lot of them bangers that have gone 60 minutes plus in some cases. I think that is a major, major advantage for Tennessee. I think that's something that if Tennessee starts off fast in this game, I think that could matter a lot over the course of 60 minutes.
Yeah, I don't just from, and you can't tell everything from a message board or social media of an entire fan base, but the Arkansas fan base doesn't seem to have a lot of confidence in this game. So I wonder if as you said, Wes, if Tennessee comes in there and jumps out 14-0, if you take the crowd out of the game immediately, maybe even take the crowd out of the game even more. Now that said, everybody might show up on campus in Fayetteville and you tailgating all day and you start getting the drinks going, you get a little riled up, and then you get to the stadium and hey, that belief starts rolling in. But excuse me, yeah, I mean that's something that Tennessee was able to do at Oklahoma, was especially defensively set the tone early, saying, okay, it's going to be a tough game for you guys. And if Tennessee's able to do that again, then I think you can get a quarterback like Taylor Green rushing a little bit. I mean, Sam Pittman this week said they have a quarterback that doesn't have a lot of confidence, which is a really peculiar thing to say. And so if you've got him preoccupied with the rush, then you're going to have him bailing a lot out of the pocket, even if he's got guys open downfield. So starting fast is something that Josh Heupel always talks about in these games. They've obviously always, their first quarter numbers are still silly, and you need that to travel. And as you said, Wes, things that this Tennessee team does well that travel are play really good defense and running the football. Now, it was a bit of a tough sledding against Oklahoma, and Arkansas is sat up the middle. You mentioned some of the size these guys have, that they're huge at defensive tackle. Yeah. Some of the teams they've played are, have maybe 2 or 3 300-pounders, and Arkansas is too deep. I think they play 5 different guys that are like all 315, 320 plus. So they've got some big bodies in the middle. Those interior offensive linemen, Cooper Mays, Andre Karich, and Javonte Spraggins, those guys are going to have to be able to win and get off those blocks and get to the linebackers who are active. But if it's all about Tennessee starting and handling its own business and creating its own energy. We heard Amari Thomas talk about how, the defensive line's like, hey, we need to set the tone when we go on the road to Oklahoma. I would imagine it's the same thing. And a stat that Josh Pate said on his show earlier this week was, I think Arkansas is like 103rd in the country in sacks allowed, and Tennessee's top 10 in pressure rate. So that's potentially a chance where if you're able to get Arkansas behind the chains and make them throw, make them be a passing team, you should have a chance to make some plays, whether that's in the backfield for sacks or down the field with some rush throws or some forced throws. So, I mean, I think you mentioned earlier, Wes, Tennessee is being good after open dates under Heupel. I think they won at Kentucky in 21. They won at LSU in 22. And then last season, I think it was A&M that they won. Now, they didn't play great that game on offense, but they still found a way to grind that one out. So, Ben, I think that's, again, like you mentioned, 6 games in 6 weeks takes a toll on a team mentally and physically. And Tennessee's coming in here fresh. And if they're able to jump out fast, then you can sort of kill the will a little bit.
Absolutely. And to your point about Amari Thomas's comment going into the Oklahoma game about the defense helping the offense and setting the tone on the road and taking the crowd out of the game, Elijah Simmons did that from the jump at Oklahoma by how he blew up. I believe it was the very first play that Oklahoma ran on offense, just absolutely blew up the play. And that was a sign of things to come.
They didn't really block him either.
No, they did not.
There were a lot of instances of Oklahoma guys not just turning guys loose.
Yes, that is for sure. But even like on that second down and third down on that drive, Tennessee did Tennessee's defense did a great job of setting the tone, and like you could tell right away that okay, Oklahoma's offense isn't going to have much success, especially with Jackson Arnold in at quarterback, and Tennessee will need to replicate that. Don't allow Talon Green to bust a big run to start the game. You just cannot allow any early momentum. I think that's the narrow path for Arkansas to victory in this one, is allowing early momentum, allowing the fans to get excited, because I do think like all the seats will have butts in them, but I don't know that it's going to be a very lively bunch unless Arkansas gives them a reason to be lively. And I think it would take Tennessee contributing to that. So again, I think it's a game that Tennessee should win. I think Tennessee is the much better team. I think the matchups favor Tennessee, but this is not a guaranteed W. This is not one that you can roll your helmet out there and you're just going to flat out win. You have to go execute. And to me, it starts in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Tennessee's defensive line, it's a matchup that it should win, as will be the case in every game just about that Tennessee plays this season. It's a new look Arkansas offensive line that they went out and got several new transfers. It kind of reminds me of NC State, to be honest with you. Several transfer additions, and I just like Tennessee's experienced defensive front going up against offensive lines that have been pieced together by transfers, especially when those transfers kind of just got there. Obviously, most notable is Addison Nichols right there in the middle, the former Tennessee offensive lineman. And then Arkansas's defensive front, they're veteran laden too, Wes. Very similar to Tennessee in that regard. Now, Tennessee's veteran defensive linemen are better than Arkansas's veteran defensive linemen. Now, Landon Jackson at defensive end, he is the real deal, and he can wreck a game and take over a game. He has that level of potential, and he's going to play in the NFL for a long, long time. So they'll need to account for Landon Jackson. And then after him, it's a bunch of older guys, veteran guys. Again, not as talented, I think, as Tennessee's older guys, but they're still older guys. So Tennessee's offensive line is going to have to be ready to play. And I think the score of this game and how close it is will probably boil down to how well the tackles play. Where's Lance Hurd at? Where's John Campbell Jr. at? If they have a strong day, then I think it could be a long night at the office for Arkansas.
Yeah, if I'm an Arkansas fan, those sack numbers and pressure numbers concern me a good bit, because I have not watched every quarter of every Arkansas game this season. I don't think any of us here have. We've seen them a good bit, right? We've seen, especially the past week or so, kind of studying them a little bit, kind of watching what we could, seeing what we could throughout the year, knowing, could you kind of put a pin in the back of your mind when Tennessee's going to play a team anytime in the next 3-4 weeks? You're like, I'll pay attention to whatever they're doing today. And it just seems like Arkansas, if they're in the 100s in sacks allowed and they have a quarterback who can move the way that quarterback can move, that's concerning, because you got to think how many he's probably avoided, right? I mean, there was a play against A&M that was a 75-yard touchdown pass that probably should have been a sack, but he kind of wiggled his way out through, and then threw one of the best balls he'll throw all year, or that anybody maybe will throw all year. Just a beautiful kind of lead out in front of the big man there for a touchdown. And I got to think he's probably avoided some sacks. So
he's also probably run them into some by holding the ball too long, trying to play and get out of the pocket.
Then that would be an extenuating circumstance. So yes, that would be my question, because I've seen him avoid some sacks, and I have not seen the plays where he's just held, and taken sacks, which I imagine Pat says it, I believe it, that he's done it. So that would be something that it's interesting, because sometimes you can see that happen where a guy will hold the ball too long because he is athletic, but that matchup, just not one that looks good for Arkansas. And to the point about the crowd, I mean, this is something we'll all definitely remember. Remember for a decade there when Tennessee wasn't very good? I think we all remember that, don't we? Pretty easy to go back and remember that. A lot of times during that, because of the schedule Tennessee played every year, Tennessee always played some bangers at home. And for like a good solid decade, the crowd showed up just wanting to produce some Neyland magic, didn't it? Like, it showed up wanting to produce some just absolute bring back. The Vols are back, Nealon's back. And the crowd showed up and was loud for like what, 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. But then it just became clear again that Tennessee can't win this game. And when Tennessee couldn't, when you realize that, the crowd went down a notch. So I wonder if that's the kind of atmosphere that you're going to see Saturday, is that Arkansas's fans are going to show up loud early saying, hey, it's under the lights. Here's the Hogs, woo pig suey. You know, Tennessee's lost here a bunch over the years or not played well here. Let's get on these guys. But then if Tennessee starts well, it gets quiet.
Well, the thing with me with this Arkansas team is it's through 5 games, it has been very chaotic. Its games have gone, and the way that this team plays. You know, they lose a game, they roll up 650 something yards ish against Oklahoma State, find a way to lose. They get outgained at Auburn in a game that featured 7 turnovers. You know, Auburn turned the ball over 5 times, and they win that game. You know, they fall behind, what was it, 17-3 against UAB before coming back.
Yeah.
You know, the A&M game is always close. So, I mean, who knows what the hell kind of version of Arkansas you're going to get. If you get Arkansas on it, though, I mean, it's like Josh Heupel said, they're a couple plays from being 5-0. So, you know, it's one of those games that's kind of tricky. You know, night games on the road in the SEC are hard. You never know how it can get away from you a little bit. You know, I don't want to bring up the South Carolina game from 2 years ago, but, you know, if you let a team get hot and they start believing and the crowd starts believing, like you mentioned, Wes, it could get away from you. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of things that, you know, I think it boils down to when Ben says Tennessee's the better team. What I get at is, I think Tennessee has less holes, and I think Tennessee has been less error or mistake prone. Arkansas, I think I said this Monday, they just seem to do a lot of things that lose football games, whether it's, you know, fake field goals that don't work or muffin punts like they did against Oklahoma State. You know, for all the turnovers that they forced on defense, and, you know, they had 4 interceptions against Auburn, they're still -2 in turnover margin. I mean, they just do a lot of things that lose games. And in the case of you know, looking at the bigger picture with this program, I mean, they lose a lot of close games. It's just it's kind of how they play. I think they had a bad record last season, but a lot of 1-score games. There are 2 losses this season, 1-score games. So it wouldn't surprise me if it gets down into the 4th quarter in this game. That just seems to be the way that this chaotic Arkansas, you know, there's just a chaotic nature to how they play. Now at the end of last season, they got blown out a couple times. But they play a lot of close games. I think probably the biggest criticism of Sam Pittman is that generally Arkansas loses those close games. So it's almost like they're there, but they don't quite have that winning mindset yet. And I think that's maybe where Tennessee, you know, can separate itself from Arkansas and programs like that, Ben, is that, I mean, Tennessee's not winning a lot of close games, but Tennessee does the things that you have to do to win. I guarantee you during the broadcast, they might bring up, you know, the Nealon maxim that the team that makes a few mistakes will win. That's this kind of game for Tennessee. You don't have to go out there and, you know, win by 50. Just win the game, make fewer mistakes, and you're going to get out of there with the win. And you're going to have 4 home games the next 5 weeks to continue building towards what you want to build toward at the end of the season.
Yeah, and in terms of the environment, I almost think that this is kind of Oklahoma 2.0. I mean, to me, it didn't seem like Oklahoma was any raucous environment that Tennessee had to play in. It might have been at kickoff, but I think it dipped off quite a bit.
There was a lot of energy,
quickly.
but it wasn't the loudest. It wasn't on like Alabama, Florida level of loud. You know, Georgia when it wants to be loud. It wasn't at that level. It was loud, but it wasn't. I don't think it was at that level.
And that's what I think Arkansas will be at the beginning of the game, or at least in the same ballpark. It can be a sneaky, good college football environment, very much like South Carolina and in Columbia at Williams-Brice is. Now, I think that Williams-Brice, when Sandstorm is going, is a better environment and louder environment for sure. But I think Arkansas is in that same ballpark. So just don't shoot yourself in the foot. It's not going to be overwhelming in terms of the environment. and the noise. And I think it's a good thing, at least as it pertains to this game, that not only has Tennessee already played in this type of environment, but it just got done playing in this type of environment. I mean, it's essentially kind of like you're replaying the Oklahoma game all over again. And I would expect them to handle that well. Nico, I thought, handled the environment well. They didn't have any pre-snap penalties at Oklahoma that I remember. They did have a lot of penalties, but I don't recall any pre-snap penalties for Tennessee in that football game, which was a question mark that we have had in the past of Tennessee's offense being able to function in those type of road environments. They have had pre-snap penalties bite them at times on the road in the past, and I don't recall that happening at Oklahoma. So this is, you just don't want to give Arkansas any momentum. And like, there is all the pressure on Tennessee, but there is also pressure on Arkansas and Sam Pittman as well. His hottest seat, or his seat is hot, I should say. He is on the hot seat, and this would be a big win for him. And I don't know that if Tennessee wins on Saturday night, they're firing Sam Pittman on Sunday morning. I don't know that they're Billy Napier level close to getting rid of him, but he is absolutely on the hot seat, and there is pressure on him to win. And it's a home game at night. They're going to be thinking that they have a chance because it's in their place at night. And Tennessee, you just can't give them any momentum whatsoever, because that's how upsets begin to fester and begin to stew and take on a life of its own. So if you're Tennessee, just go in there, be yourself, continue to play and execute the way that you have, and you should be perfectly fine.
Yeah, and Tennessee taking a defense of this caliber on the road now, it just definitely changes things. It does. It gives you an element of control that you've not had really at any point during the Heupel era. Is you feel like you can go do that, and so that's a big deal. But there are also some unknowns. There's some concerns, obviously. Sometimes it's great that you take an open date. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you'd rather keep playing. It depends. We'll see what wrinkles there are. We could talk about that a little bit there in the second segment as well. If there's any new things Tennessee could have theoretically worked on during the open date. And then we'll get on out of here after that. But before we do all that, let's go ahead and step away, pay some bills, listen to products, services, in-house ads, etc., and then come right back here on the GoVols247 Podcast. #ad. Welcome back to the GoVols247 Podcast, brought to you by whatever products, services, and in-house ads you just heard a moment ago during that commercial break. Wes Rucker coming to you from Fort Rucker Studio. Ben McKee coming to you from his home studio. Patrick Brown coming to you from an undisclosed location here on a lovely, to this point, Thursday morning, a Chamber of Commerce morning, God's own Knoxville, Tennessee, which of course is not where Tennessee is going to play this weekend. The Vols will be several miles to the west in Fayetteville, Arkansas, to play the Arkansas Razorbacks, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ABC, which of course is not the world's greatest network, but it's a solid one. Those guys do good work over there, and they'll do a nice job handling the game as per usual. Got a lot more to discuss in this podcast. Before we do that, though, just a quick request from our end to please go in there and take a minute out of your day, rate and review and subscribe to this podcast. Please, guys, it takes you just a minute to do, and it just means a lot to us. We do this podcast for free. We want to keep doing it for free. As long as we can, we'll do it for free. But what helps us do that for free is if y'all go in there and rate, review, subscribe, and tell your friends. Now we're also we've got it streaming on YouTube. We've got it on Facebook. It's on all of the services now, pretty much. So anywhere that you can get it, click the like button, subscribe, leave a review. That really helps with the algorithms. Tell your friends also. If you're traveling to the airport, if you're flying over to Arkansas, which I hope you are, because that's a long drive. But if you are, you see some Tennessee fans in the airport, right? People love wearing their college schools in the airport, whether it's on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You'll see some orange out there. You're sitting there waiting at the terminal. You're sitting there getting food, getting a bite at the bar, whatever you're doing. Tell people next to you, hey, you're waiting here on this airplane. You want to listen to this GoVols247 podcast? Get this downloaded before your flight. that would be super. If you're already doing all that stuff, thank you so much. We love you. If not,
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
guys, before we get back into football, would like to mention that Tennessee is playing with a helmet decal this weekend. If you live in this area, or if you have access to any of the news, you've seen some of the horrible, heart wrenching, heart pump, just awful, awful pictures of what life is like for many people here in Appalachia right now. For instance, even small things, I don't want to say small things, big things, like right now, there's really not an interstate connection between Tennessee and North Carolina because it got washed away. And I'm not trying to laugh while I'm saying that. I'm saying it's incredible to think about that happening, but it has happened. And there are several towns in this state and across the border there in North Carolina, below that in Georgia, that have just been absolutely ransacked by that hurricane and the colossal flooding and everything. And Tennessee has been doing what I think is a good job all week of pointing out some places where you can donate money, because people always in these moments, these good people have hearts and say, how can I help? And you're out there looking, and it can be easy to kind of give money to the wrong place. So they're trying to get you to point money toward the right directions where you know that there's low overhead and that stuff is going directly to the people over there. So Tennessee will be bringing awareness to that with a helmet decal this week. Happy to see that because it is, I think we all know people in this kind of part of the world, right? Everybody kind of knows somebody who knows somebody who's going through something. And when something like this happens, and it's bad out there. It's bad, and the government's trying to get in there and help. And it's been rough though, and it's going to take a long time. Like I don't think I-40 is going to get fixed till a year from now, basically. So we're in for a long haul with this, but Tennessee brings some awareness to it, which hopefully will get the broadcast talking about it, and some places people can funnel money, because it has sucked. I'll put it that way. That's the nicest way I can put it, I think, is that it has sucked, guys.
It has. It really has. And my continued thoughts and prayers are with everybody who has been affected. We had somebody on the board last night that was communicating with us, saying that they were finally able to download y'all's podcast, I believe, that you recorded earlier this week, or maybe it was the one that I don't know. There was a recent podcast that they downloaded and listened to, and they were thankful for that bit of relief mentally. So feel bad that y'all have to listen to me as relief, but we hope that we can be a bit of a break from just all the unfortunate situations that have taken place as a result of the hurricane. But I think I speak for all of us when I say our thoughts and prayers are continuing to be with those who were affected. It's a really sad situation, and just there's really no words for it other than
when entire towns are gone. Yeah, there's no words.
There's no words for it. At least I'll speak for myself. I certainly pray about it, and then you try and take the next step of action, and not just sit. You can't only pray for it. You got to take some action as well. So, but do know, if you are listening to this and if you've been affected, we are thinking of you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been even days after, you still see and hear things of just stuff being just wiped away, and it's like, I mean, how do you even restart if you're somebody that was impacted by this? And so, yeah, I mean, good on Tennessee for trying to bring some awareness to it, and I wonder if they'll try to step up some contributions for relief, maybe with some, with the Florida game coming up and things like that. But we'll see.
I hope that they do, because excuse me, the Florida game being next week would be a really good time to have one of those canned food drives, and there's other things too that don't necessarily come to mind immediately, but like for those of us who have kids this age, like some toys, those things can come in very helpful. These kids need to have something to still be kids again, right? That kind of stuff. Food for your animals, right? Animals a lot of times get the short end of the stick when things like this go on, and you see stranded animals who need help.
Medication.
Yes, medication for people. Like there's all kinds of things, blankets. I mean, there's it's not just like obviously bottles of water, probably number one, that kind of stuff. But there's also other things that you can give, that you can do. You know, if you've got if your kid's got, you know, too many toys and you want to declutter your house a little bit, this is a great time to do that. Go find one of those places that will send some of those toys for kids over there to play with. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can do. Or if you just, you know, find the right organization that you can donate money and they'll use their money to go buy things and do stuff. So whatever you can do, please do. We've been trying to help at our house get some things together, and I hope that everyone else who has the means is able to do that, because it has sucked and it is going to suck for a while. But what we can do hopefully is maybe make it suck a little bit less for people. That's you can't fix this immediately, but hopefully we can make it a little better. Guys, back to the game this week. In terms of, we've always seen that, we saw this with Tennessee, you know, a little bit defensively, but I think probably more so offensively the first few weeks, doing a couple of different things, right? You had some, you know, you had some of that 12 personnel stuff. You had some 4 wide stuff. They've thrown just about, you know, not everything, but they've thrown a bunch of stuff out there to make teams have to prepare for lots and lots of stuff. Anything in particular? And again, we don't have access to practice during the season, so we don't visually see anything. So it would be just a guess. So that's why I don't feel bad speculating about this. But in terms of things that you think, if you're Tennessee, that need to be sharpened up, or things that could be tried that haven't to this point this season, because you probably would like to go as vanilla as possible if you could and win this game. That would be ideal, but that might not be the case, right? I mean, that might not be the case. You never know. So what are some things, you know, maybe getting Mike Matthews back involved a little bit? Or are there some other things that you see that you go, I would like to see this?
I think Matthews might be a good one, Wes. I think he played 2 snaps against Oklahoma after making some plays against Kent State. Kelsey Pope saying this week, Tennessee's wide receivers coach, saying that, you know, he's a guy that we're going to need. He's continuing to come on. Obviously, he was slowed a little bit in preseason camp. Matthews was, so maybe playing a little catch up has been the case for him. I don't think he played in the first 2 games, and he didn't play in the first 2 games because
correct,
he comes out in his debut against Kent State and makes 3 plays that are like, you're like, yep, that guy's 5-star.
People are like, is he going to redshirt? No, it's not. No.
So, I mean, this is a chance to maybe get him more involved. You know, again, they rotate a lot at receiver, but they didn't rotate as much against Oklahoma. I don't recall. I think Brew played most of the snaps. Obviously, Squirrel is losing some snaps to that 12 personnel because he's the guy that comes off the field generally. And then I think there was a pretty even split between Brazel and Thornton, which I take it as Dante's kind of taking some snaps there from Brazel, which is, you know, when you're producing, and Dante's not reeling in 10 catches a game, but man, he's 4 of his 7 catches have gone for 30+ yards. So he's making some big plays. So, yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about this game is that Tennessee they saw a 3-3-5 against NC State. Oklahoma came out with I don't want to call it a junk defense, but it's kind of what it is when you play one way every other game and then bring out this one, which they basically did what Missouri did. I don't know that at this point of the season how many times that's going to happen for Tennessee, unless you just play a team that has an open date. Now, you know, in cases of Missouri last season, Oklahoma this season, they probably worked on it a little bit during the off season, maybe a little bit during camp. And then they probably, you know, in Oklahoma's case, they probably thought they had 3 games that they could win easily early in the season, and may have even worked on it during those game weeks. So, yeah, I don't know how much they'll see that. I don't know if they'll, you know, if teams try to copy that. Didn't work super great for Oklahoma. I know they, you know, the point totals and yards were what they were, but we all know that Tennessee ease off in the second half. I would not expect that to be the game plan in this one. Now, if the game starts flowing that way, you could see Tennessee get conservative. But like we talked about last week, Ben, I don't. That's not really Josh Heupel's nature on offense, is to, you know, play with the restrictor plate on. So I wouldn't expect that to be the case in this one, and that would be good. I mean, I kind of want to see what this offense does with its foot on the gas for 4 quarters. I mean, maybe that's the answer to your question, Wes, is, you know, they blow out Chattanooga, all the starters are out at halftime. They blow out Kent State, all the starters are out before halftime. I would say they probably kept their foot on the gas a lot against NC State, even though, at 51-10, they got the backups in the fourth quarter. But, you want to see it against the SEC defense. You want to see them, what it's like if, Nico plays the whole game and they've got to keep the foot on the gas and they can't go into game management, slow it down, clock killing mode. So maybe that's the question. Maybe that's the answer to your question, Wes, is we just want to see this offense do what it does for an entire 60 minutes. And is that going to be required in this game? Maybe not. Will it be required the rest of the season? Maybe not with the way Tennessee's defense is playing. You get to maybe facing Alabama and Georgia and some of those offenses, you're going to need to put up 35, 40 points.
Yeah.
This one may not be that game, but you never know. So I think this offense has to be ready to go out there, full tilt, pedal to the, rock and roll, all of that, all those kind of phrases. And that's maybe something that we haven't seen yet that maybe a lot of fans want to see too, is what this offense looks like going full bore for an entire game.
I completely agree with everything you just said. And I think ultimately it boils down to how the tackles are playing. How is Lance Hurd playing? And is John Campbell Jr. out there, depending on his chronic injury that he's dealing with? And if he's not out there, then Larry Johnson III or Dane Davis, are they playing well?
Are you about to call him Larry the Third?
I got my
King Larry, third of his name.
I put the in the wrong place. Benjamin the McKee thinks that Tennessee being able to keep their foot on the gas boils down to whether or not the tackles are performing well, because that's ultimately what led to Heupel calling off the dogs in that game. He didn't want to get Nico hurt. He had already seen Nico lose a couple of fumbles because the tackles got beat and got to Nico as a result. And that was the only way that Oklahoma was going to climb back into that football game was a defensive score or a momentum swinging play of that nature, in which it set up the Oklahoma offense to punch it in. I mean, how different does that football game in Oklahoma look like if Tennessee's defense doesn't turn around and force that fumble? What if Oklahoma punches it in for a score there? All of a sudden it's a totally different football game. And that's what Heupel was trying to avoid there in the second half, and rightfully so. So looking at this game, I think that the tackles once again will dictate how the game plays out offensively. In terms of what Arkansas tries to do, I do think you're going to see a lot of what Oklahoma tried to do, Patrick. I mean, Sam Pittman kind of told on himself this week. He said in his Monday press conference, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, hey, we saw some things that Oklahoma tried to do against this Temple offense, against this Tennessee offense, and we made note of it. We're working on it in practice.
Who's going to be their Dejon Terry this week?
I was about to say, going down and faking an injury on first downs is exactly one of the things he had to have been talking about. It had to have been.
I don't think it. I think it was more of a schematic thing defensively. That he was referencing, and I think what Oklahoma was trying to do was they were trying to give the perception that they were loading the box, but then having some of their outside backers, their safeties, nickel guys kind of show that they're in the box, but then drop into coverage and drop into the flat or drop into this zone, that zone, whatever. Essentially disguised blitzes and disguised pressures and things along those lines. So, and I think that's what he was alluding to, because that's what Oklahoma did. They tried to act like they were loading the box to stop the run, and then they were dropping guys in coverage. And I would imagine that that's what he was pointing to. And to Patrick's point, Patrick flat out said, and I completely agree, it didn't necessarily work the greatest. The Oklahoma's best defense in that game was Tennessee's own tackles.
Yeah. Them getting beat was what I think, as much as anything, led to, because Heupel could talk all day long, and I believe him when he talks about how the flow of the game meant that because the defense was playing so well that they could slow it down a little bit or kind of not be quite as aggressive and could punt a little bit more. Also, I think a good part of the playbook was just unavailable because they could not protect at tackle. If you can't contain a pass rush off the edges, then you lose a tremendous amount of your playbook. There's so many plays you just can't run because you can't protect long enough for some of those things to happen. Like even Tennessee moving as fast as it does, it still has some what you might call slow or moderately slow developing stuff where you're banking on the quarterback getting a few seconds to go make a decision to do something. And that's not there in those games, because when they did do that, Nico was either getting hit or he was getting moved off the spot.
Well, I think that game showed again something we've seen and something we saw during the first month of the season is that Tennessee has a lot of different ways to get it done on offense. Because teams are so focused a lot of times, sometimes on stopping the run. Going into the game, you can't let Tennessee just run all over you. So your safeties are going to bite, and they're going to leave the middle of the field wide open for Dante Thornton with a free release to run a post and get open. They're going to, Tennessee's able to manipulate the coverage to where they get Brew McCoy isolated on a side. They kind of did the same thing on Dante's touchdown too. They're able to see how you're playing, make little tweaks, and find openings. And we saw adjustments like that formationally where they overloaded one side, maybe use some motion to sort of, this offense is big on eye candy. A lot of them are, but this one is more subtle about it because the way they go so fast, you don't really think about motion being a lot of what they do, but they're able to do some pre-snap stuff that kind of draws your attention here, and they just go where the numbers are the least. I mean, that's and then, to the 3-man front issue, they came out in 12 personnel the second drive. So they're able to adjust. They hit the big plays early. Then they were able to just run it down Oklahoma's throat there at the end of the half with Dylan Sampson on that drive. So that's the test for these, for these defenses. And, something that Heupel said earlier this week with Arkansas is that they're pretty good against the run because all 3 levels they've got some active linebackers. Xavier Sori is a Georgia transfer, was a former 5-star guy. You don't have to watch a lot of Arkansas to hear his name called pretty quickly when they're on defense. As I mentioned, they make a lot of plays on the football in the secondary. That's something Squirrel White mentioned earlier this week too. I think Arkansas is second in the SEC in passes defense. That's interceptions plus pass breakups. I think they've got 28 so far this season. Now they have a lot of those interceptions came against Auburn, who they're serving up interceptions to everyone these days. But they just make a lot of plays on the ball. Yeah, they make a lot of plays on the football. The PFF numbers suggest they play more zone than man, which is interesting, which means, Nico's going to have to not telegraph where he's going with the football. He's going to have to make some anticipation throws, throw it in this window when the guy's still in this window on the other side of a defender, that kind of thing. And when you do get man, that's when you take your shots. So, and we know what this offense is going to do. We know what's in the arsenal, but that they also, every kind of game plan, there will be little wrinkles, little new things that we maybe haven't seen before. We didn't see the shovel pass against Oklahoma. I wonder if we'll see it in this game. Some of the tight end screens. Ben hates the shovel pass. I love the shovel pass. They just can only throw it. They can only do it for Dylan Sampson. They can't get anybody.
I like it when it works.
Yeah, I am a big
everyone.
fan of it when it works. When it doesn't work, it sucks. And why'd you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a draw play is what it is. I mean, it's a pass in name
Pass draw.
only. It's a draw because
I did love Dylan Sampson's explanation of it. He was like, it's kind of just like trusting
praying to God.
Praying to God. Jesus, take the wheel because you don't see anything behind you. I was like, that's a good thought.
Yeah, you might catch the ball, turn around, and have nothing but space in front of you, or you might catch the ball, turn around, and the linebacker's coming through your chest. Yeah, it's well, I think we can almost always count on them. I don't know. Do we see him against Oklahoma? I don't know. Maybe they were kind of too busy trying to adjust to what they were seeing, which it wasn't necessarily the 3-man front. It was more who was on the field and how they were playing. Because like Ben said, I mean, they had kind of overhang guys that were kind of cheating toward the box and then bailing if it was pulled. And it was also the lineup on the field because it was basically a 3-2-6 in terms of, they had 6 defensive backs. You basically take a linebacker off the field or take a defensive lineman off the field, and instead of replacing him with maybe a linebacker, you replace him with a safety. I mean, essentially, that's essentially what they were doing. Arkansas has some pretty good safeties, so I don't know. You could see something like that. I don't know, but this is a defense that in Arkansas that's big in the middle. They've got some active guys off the edge. Their linebackers are playing downhill, so Tennessee's got to get hat on those guys, and they've got to get Sampson and Bishop to that second level where they can do what they do best, and that's make those safeties miss. And I think that's going to be key for Tennessee to be able to run the football in this game.
Yeah, that stuff on the defense with Arkansas, you're right about that Auburn offense. I mean, I go back to, if y'all might be too young to remember some of those McDonald's signs out there that said like over 1 million served or over 1 billion served. That's like Auburn's offense right now, serving turnovers. You drive by it, you're like over 1 billion turnovers served. I mean, yeah, I mean that's kind of, they got some stuff that they're going to have to figure out there.
Well, there's 3 teams in the SEC with negative turnover margins. Arkansas is -2. Florida is -4. Anyone want to venture a guess what Auburn's turnover margin is?
-10.
8.
11.
Ooh, so there you go. Yeah. Yeah, that's not good. If you're trying to win football games, that is not conducive to winning football games. But last thing I've got, and if y'all have more, that's fine. But the last thing I had is that I think in this game, especially, I've noticed this with Arkansas. Arkansas can be, for a team that plays some mostly moderate to lower scoring games at times, they try some stuff. They fake things. They keep the offense out there. They'll fake field goals, fake punts. They really.
I think their longest run last week against A&M was the fake punt.
Yeah, and that was well designed. I mean, because when you do that when you have the quarterback, the running punter guy, like Tennessee's got one, the running punter guys, they get that running start or whatever, like they're gonna go out there and do one of those rugby punts.
We want to see them do. We want to see Tennessee do this with. We want to see Tennessee do this with Jackson Ross. Is what we're saying.
Yeah, I mean, come on. He's an Aussie rules football guy. He can take a hit. He's all right. He's Australian. Those guys don't get hurt.
Yeah, the fact that he's made it 24 years of his life living in Australia, where literally everything can kill you.
Yes,
exactly.
That is Darwinism in action. If you live more than 20 years in that country and you have not been killed by either a crocodile, a spider, by a boxing kangaroo, by any of the sharks out in the water, everything there can kill you, every single thing. So yeah, he'll be fine. Just let him do one of those occasionally. But no, seriously, Arkansas does do some of that stuff. And in this kind of game, you're hosting a top 4 team in your own building. I think Tennessee needs to be aware for all that stuff. Now, it doesn't mean that you just, you have your head, spinning on a swivel so much that you're never focusing on anything, but you do need to be aware, because in this game, like Arkansas, the way things are for Arkansas right now, looking at that schedule, Arkansas has to win all the games it's supposed to win, and then it's got to beat one of like 5 top 15 teams in order to get to a bowl now. That's where things are. That schedule being what it is. They didn't beat A&M, right? Didn't beat Oklahoma State. Could have won both those games and didn't. Now, to get to 6 wins, like they got to win the couple they're supposed to win, which are not gimmies, but they need to win them. And then they got to beat like either, a Tennessee or another top 15 team, or else they're not going to get there. So they're going to have to try some stuff, because what's the risk at this point? If you lose, you lose, right? Like they're going to, I would imagine that they'll try some trick play stuff. I would imagine that Petrino's going to draw up some stuff. I would imagine special teams wise, they're going to try some stuff, because why wouldn't you if you're them? If you're them in this game, why would you not do that?
I was going to let Ben talk first.
See, that was a trick play on you, Wes. We fooled you. No,
Yeah,
I think you're absolutely.
That was the Statue of Liberty. I'm going to throw it here in just a second, because since none of y'all took it.
Yeah, that's exactly what that was. But no, you're completely spot on. Arkansas has to think out of the box and execute out of the box in order to win this football game. They really, really do. And their kick returner, I'm blanking on his name. Patrick, help me out. He's the receiver. He's a pretty dang good return specialist as well. He was all conference last year and is already in like the top 10 in school history and return yards and things of that nature. So Mike Eckler's coverage units are going to need to be on point. But that is Arkansas's path to victory, Wes, is coming up with funky plays that produce points, whether it be a special teams touchdown or a flea flicker that sets up a touchdown because you were able to get down the field on the flea flicker, or a defensive turnover on your side of the field, like we saw Tennessee turn it over at Oklahoma, like I talked about earlier. Tennessee has to avoid those plays, the momentum changing plays in this football game, because that is Arkansas's path to victory. Because on paper, X's and O's wise, Tennessee has the better football players. They're more athletic. They have more depth. I think they have better coaching, although Bobby Petrino, I think, has done some pretty good things. And something we haven't really spent a ton of time talking about on today's podcast is Taylon Green himself. I think we've mentioned him in passing, but obviously that's going to be a big aspect to this game as well, and Tennessee's ability to limit him, because I'm sure he will bust a run or two. He's not going to be completely shut out. But I think this is a big game for Arion Carter. I would assume that they use him a lot in kind of a spy type of role defensively. His speed and athleticism, you would think for a linebacker, matches up pretty well with Taylon Green. So as long as Tennessee plays good fundamental football and doesn't beat itself, Tennessee will be perfectly fine, as we've said multiple times. Arkansas's only path to victory is exactly what you were talking about, is thinking outside of the box, executing outside of the box, whether it be a trick play offensively. Eye discipline will be really key for Tennessee's defense, or the special teams as well, being locked in. And I would think that Mike Eckler, Patrick, has his group locked in, ready to go, and aware that they're going to throw the kitchen sink at Tennessee.
Yeah, I think Eckler was, if he was watching that game last week, he probably called like an immediate emergency special teams meeting, like, okay, guys, Arkansas just faked a punt for a 25-yard run. Let's get in here and see how they schemed it up and all that stuff, or whatever.
Everybody here by 07:30.
No, not even, just ASAP. ASAP is possible. Get here. Ben is Isaiah Satania, the returner you were mentioning. Okay,
he's a very good returner.
I think he got loose for a touchdown against Auburn too on a big play. So for Tennessee's defense, I think it all starts with the run game. I think you've got to make Arkansas throw to beat you. We talked about this a little bit Monday, Ben. I don't know that Tennessee's just going to spy Taylon Green every play. But I think what you have to,
they should. I think
what you have to do is I think you'll see them play some zone. That way your linebackers are always have an eye on the quarterback. And I think you've got to, I don't want to say load the box. You don't have to put 8 in the box, but I think you got to make sure your numbers are right. You can't be outnumbered to where you have 6 guys in the box. Arkansas has got 5 offensive linemen and a running back in protection, and then Green's the extra guy. I mean, we talk about the numbers a lot with Tennessee's offense. Well, Tennessee's defense can't put themselves in bad number situations in this game, so there inherently is going to have to be some times where they trust Jamad McCoy and Ricky Gibson and whoever's at star, whether it's Christian Harrison or Boo Carter, or and maybe a safety or two to play man and hold up in man, because they're going to have to commit that 7th guy, not necessarily a box to stop the run game. That'll be part of it too, but just to have an extra set, just have an extra hat to account for Green, because I think one of the things he does sometimes is he bails early to try to extend a play when maybe he doesn't need to. So you got to try to make him a pocket passer, and I think you have to account for him. I think that has to start for Tennessee. If you do that schematically and let your defensive line win up front, then if you take away Arkansas's run game like A&M did, then they're going to be big play reliant, and they're going to be it's going to be a frustrating day for them. Even with Petrino, he's a good drawing. He's really good at drawing up some ball plays, as we know, and so that's going to be a fun little chess match in this game. Some of his play calls, how do they match up with what Tim Banks does, who likes to mix things up and give different looks. But I think if you're Tennessee, you got to defensively, I think you got to take away the run game. You got to add numbers to the box, and you've got to try to make Arkansas throw to beat you.
Do y'all remember when we used to talk about, we were talking about this time how Tennessee doesn't really like to spy a lot, just not specifically do that. And there was a time during the Dooley era where they just kept not using a spy either. And we were like, how many more running quarterbacks are going to have to kill you before you use a spy or whatever? And we mentioned this all the time. And then Dooley came out one time and said, guys, even if I use a spy, I don't have anybody athletic enough to make that one-on-one play. So why would I use a spy?
Well, sometimes
one of my favorite Dooley.
Sometimes you can use a spy, and if they run a quarterback draw, the center is out leading the way anyway, or the running back. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's the numbers game more than like, are you going to have a spy 75% of the time?
Yeah, it just made me laugh all the time because that he just made like he was one of the many times where he said something out loud that most coaches would think, but none of them would ever say. And he'd be like, guys, I don't have anybody who can make that play anyway. Like, it's like I was like, guys, he's not the answer. He's not the guy.
Well, Tennessee fans are, I'm sure, thinking just don't use the game plan from the Ole Miss game in 21 where Matt Corral had like 15 quarterback draws for roughly 275 yards.
Yes, that
Converted
was,
several 3rd and 15s and 3rd and 20s.
Yes, that was a
Let's not do that.
It was a rough day. It was a rough day, is what that was.
It was eventful though. We got all the shenanigans with the. I like using that word because Wes hates it. He's
I know
staring daggers at me right now.
It just makes me think of the Super Troopers quote. I'm going to pistol up the next guy who says shenanigans.
Which is funny because Wes is full of shenanigans.
Full of them. Just full of them.
But he's never thrown a mustard bottle or a golf ball onto a college football field at a game.
Are we sure that he hasn't?
That's a good point.
I've thrown golf clubs, but not at people. Just into the wilderness or into the Atlantic Ocean in one case. But I've never
what kind of club did you throw into the Atlantic Ocean?
8-iron in Charleston, South Carolina. Off
8-iron is like one of the easiest clubs to hit, man.
Off of Wild Dunes Golf Club there in just outside of Hilton Head, or in Hilton Head, South Carolina. Yeah, 8-iron's my favorite club too. But you play, you know what a links course is, right? Y'all are golf guys to some extent. You know a links course. It's out there on like by the ocean, and it's super windy.
Hit it low and let it roll, right?
I'm a high ball hitter, and so I hit an 8-iron that was just absolutely flush. The wind, I think, changed course. Like it just seemed like, oh, it's obviously blowing like left to right, and it blew it right to left, and I just got so mad that I threw my 8-iron and it went into the Atlantic Ocean.
Just blaming something else.
No, I mean I'm not good, but I hit that ball well, and I didn't get anything out of it, and so I got mad. I got mad. I was younger. I regret it. My wife was laughing, but also maybe a little scared, and it was fun. It was a good day. It was a good day. I got another one that matched the set. We're good, but yeah. So I don't throw mustard bottles at people, if that's what you're asking.
Even bad SEC football referees.
I want to, but I don't. SEC basketball referees are the absolute worst. But yeah, nonetheless. Anything else, guys, before we step out of here? I know that this is we'll have coverage obviously after the game. I think we're doing it the way we did it last week, right? Where the two guys who are not at the stadium will do the podcast because it's easier to transmit that way. So we'll try to get done to you that way. We'll have video work from the guys who are there. We will have, obviously, Ben's had baseball coverage all week, and it's been fantastic stuff there on GoVols247 with all the scrimmage updates of all the new faces launching balls out of the yard, pitchers throwing big arm, pitchers throwing strikes. Been good stuff, Ben. You want to say anything about that before we step out of here?
Thank you for mentioning that. Been fun to get back in Lindsey Nelson Stadium. It's weird because there's no press box there, so I'm out on the porches having to dodge left and right home runs that are being hit my way. But it's fun because there's a lot of competition, a lot of talent all throughout the position player side of it in the outfield and the infield. Hunter Inslee and Dean Curley are the only two guys that you know for sure are going to be starters. I should say, Andrew, there's some other guys that you know are going to be starters, but it's
Fisher starting somewhere, yeah.
Yes, of where they are going to start.
It's starting somewhere.
Right. But even Dean, like he may be not starting at shortstop. He could be starting elsewhere in the infield. Him and I think it's Kylan, by the way.
It is. You're right. No, you're right. It is Kylan. You're absolutely right.
Curley and Kylan, one of those two guys will be your starting shortstop, and the other probably plays second base or maybe elsewhere. But a lot of competition. Fun to see the newcomers. They've got some fun newcomers, and like Wes alluded to, I have plenty of coverage of all of that up at GoVols247.com.
And basketball stuff too. That is coming around the bend. It is almost here. And we saw interviews with a couple of the new guys within the past week or so. So that's been good.
You didn't mention your Q&A with the head man.
Yes, Q&A with Tony V Spoke to him earlier this week. He was gracious with his time as always. Just wanted to sit down with him and do a little bit of a fall baseball preview, and he answered some questions on the position player side of things, and that was part one. And then
Part two is all about Ibiza.
Yes, all about Ibiza, umpires, Jeffrey Macias. Part two will be published here shortly. It'll be published by the time you're hearing this podcast. And he talks about the pitchers and the pitching side of things and staff additions. So if you missed that, I encourage you to go check it out. Tony V was great as always, and there's always a quote within the quote, insight within the quote. So go look for the golden nuggets that Tony likes to drop when he is speaking to the media. So Patrick, thanks for mentioning that as well.
Noah Webster, American patriot, big time patriot, loved his country. That's definitely when we have when we shift over to baseball pods again here down the road. That quote will absolutely be in the intro. I guarantee you, Noah Webster, big time patriot, loved his country, is absolutely going to be in there.
My last thing on baseball is I haven't heard, haven't asked. I meant to, but I just did not do it. I apologize. I wonder if, which as I say this, Arkansas has announced that Danico Slaughter and Addison Nichols will be captains this weekend.
Didn't work out so well for Oklahoma.
Didn't work for Dejoun Terry.
No, it did not. But I would love to see Tony Vitello stroll into Arkansas Razorback Stadium
Pope Mobile.
In a national championship T-shirt.
Like the president has to drive around in the Beast, like the armored limo, basically, with its like bulletproof everywhere and bomb proof on the bottom. They would need Vitello to roll in on the Beast, basically, in Fayetteville, I think.
I just hope he rolls in national championship apparel.
Walks out just.
Yeah, that's it's 1 week after the Heupel or 2 weeks after the Heupel homecoming. You have V going back to Arkansas. Yeah, that would be good. And also, last thing, also Patrick's had a lot of great stuff on the site this week with the matchups. We're gonna have more of it. We're gonna have some stuff with our friends over at Hog Sports, Trey Biddy and his gang. They're one of the better sites in our network. They do an awesome job. Also, congrats to 24/7 for acquiring Power Mizzou. That's a big time site. Really the only Mizzou side of any note, because, and to be honest, the reason that we've never had a Mizzou side over the years is because there's really only one and we couldn't get it yet. And those guys get all the Mizzou subscribers, and now they're coming to join our team. So now it would have been nice when Tennessee played Mizzou every season to have had those guys there, but it's nice to have them anyways. Those guys, welcome on into the family. They're really good. They have all kinds of good coverage. So now we'll know more about Mizzou than we have before in the past. And so that's good. We will have stuff with our Arkansas guys. We'll have Better Know Foe when they get those answers. I did the Q&A with those guys this week. That should be on their site. I think maybe this morning it went up. So there's plenty of coverage there, plenty of good stuff. Ben's had tons of good basketball and baseball stuff. Tennessee football, obviously front and center right now. Recruiting, Ryan, that never stops. Ryan sleeps, but recruiting coverage does not sleep. But maybe
his internet sleeps a lot too.
Yeah, it does. His internet, his AOL, you got mail, dial up 14.4K that he's got going on over there. We're gonna have to work on that. We're gonna have to get that fixed. But we will be there throughout the weekend. We'll have plenty of coverage of Tennessee, Arkansas. We'll have a podcast after the game for sure. Don't know if we'll have a pregame one with the Arkansas guys yet. Still working on that. We'll definitely be there after the game. We will have tons of pregame coverage, tons of in-game coverage, tons of post-game coverage. Baseball coverage, basketball coverage, Maria covering Lady Vols. All of it is at GoVols247.com. So if you're listening on one of the podcast feeds, then you're going to hear the outro. But if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you will not. So for those people watching on Facebook and YouTube, I will say farewell. And Ben and Pat, thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you, Wesley.
See you, Wes.